Okay, so our next question, a physician orders 500 milliliters of an IV solution to run over 10 hours via an infusion pump. The nurse understands that the rate will be stated and programmed as milliliters per hour. Okay, so we're using an infusion pump, and so it's our machine. And with our machines, with our infusion pumps, they always operate under 60 drops per 1 milliliter. You could use micro tubing, you could use macro tubing, but when it comes to the programming, the reading on the IV pump, it will always say 60 drops per 1 ml. It will operate on that basis. Likewise, it will always give you your flow rate in milliliters per hour. So the question asks, what will be the tubing factor for the infusion pump? Round off to the nearest whole number. This is a trick question. They've set this up so it's like you'll sit here with 500 milliliters and you'll say, okay, it pumps over a period of 10 hours. And so I've got my flow rate. And so they're going to ask me, oh, wait, what's my tubing factor? If I've got 500 milliliters, okay, 500 milliliters over 10 hours. This is a setup using a flow rate. So I've got a basic flow rate. And they want me to find my drop factor. And my drop factor would tell me what kind of tubing I'm using. But given that it's an infusion pump, it will always be 60 drops per minute, or 60 drops per milliliter, which would always be microtubing. And you could say, well, okay, but how am I supposed to know it's microtubing if this IV pump can use either microtubing or macrotubing? And that's a very valid question. It's like, how am I, well, okay, if I can use either or, how can I be complete for sure it's micro or macro? We're operating under the premise of 60 drops per milliliter. And if we're going to say that, no matter what kind of tubing you use, whether it's micro or macro, we're not asking for what kind of tubing you'd use, whether it is macro or micro. We're asking what's the tubing factor. So regardless of which kind of tubing you use, it will always be the tubing factor of 60 drops per milliliter if you're using an IV pump. And so this part here where we have round off to the nearest whole number, they just threw that in there to trick you. There's no calculation here. So this is a concept-based question. It's whether you know it or you don't. If you know that IV pumps always use 60 drops per ml and the flow rate's always in milliliters per hour, then you are golden here. You would get the correct answer.